welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Eva, and today we're going to be talking about burnout. Now, I did a previous video on burnout, and this was just going over the 6 areas of burnout and what kind of leads to burnout in the first place, early warning signs, and full-on symptoms of burnout once you're already there. I wanted to go a little bit deeper into this topic to actually discuss ways you can address burnout once it's already occurring, and just share some things that can help you if you're experiencing burnout yourself. In this video, I will be covering work burnout specifically, but I'm going to be making 2 more videos on school burnout and just emotional burnout and ways that you can address that. Work burnout is one of the most common types of burnout that people experience these days, and this is primarily due to just work overload, having too much work to do in a given day and feeling like you can't leave work at work. So basically a disruption in work-life balance. If you feel like you're currently experiencing work burnout, then stay tuned for some of these tips that I'm going to share with you to get out of that hole. As always, if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe, like this video if you'd like to see more videos like this, and leave a comment down below if you feel like you are experiencing burnout, or if you have experienced burnout in the past, what did you do to get out of that? I wanted to start off this video by just reviewing some of the things that I mentioned in the previous video on burnout, which just gave kind of a background on what burnout is, how it's defined, how you can think about it, how it differs from stress, anxiety, depression, even though all of those are still closely related. I did talk about the 6 areas of burnout, and these are 6 areas that have to do with why burnout is created in the first place, or factors that influence even becoming burnout or what leads up to burnout. Basically, the causes of burnout tend to lie in one or more of these 6 areas. The first area is workload, so working too little or working too much. The second area is control, so feeling like you don't have control, feeling helpless, feeling like you don't really have a say in work decisions, also being micromanaged. The third area is reward, so not just what you're getting paid, but also what you get out of the work that you're doing, almost like satisfaction or being acknowledged for the work that you're putting out. Fourth is community, so finding support not just with your boss, but with your coworkers and feeling a sense of belonging and community versus feeling isolated. 5 is fairness, so dealing with favoritism at work or discrimination. And 6 is values, what you feel like you're getting out of your job, what you feel like you're contributing to society, your passion, your fulfillment, what makes your work meaningful. So these 6 areas are very important just in general when reflecting on your job and your work and just kind of seeing where you are with your career. I'm sure just going through that list right now, you can kind of relate to some of those issues or just get a sense of where you lie in each of the 6 areas. Maybe there's one area that stands out to you that you noticed has been an issue for you, or an area that has affected you in the past that maybe you've moved through already. So really quickly, just some signs again to review of burnout kind of on the horizon. Not fully burnout yet, but just signs that kind of build up to burnout eventually, because as I mentioned in the video previously, burnout does take a while to develop. So it's not quick, it's not overnight. It does take a while to get there. So these are just some signs that come up that you can address early to really prevent burnout from going full blown. So some early warning signs are when things begin to change both externally and internally for you. If you notice that you're feeling a bit different, you're feeling off, you're feeling tired, you're getting irritable a bit more than usual, you're getting frustrated at your job, you're beginning to not have as much motivation to complete your work tasks, you're starting to get to work late. A big one is you're starting to not enjoy your work anymore and it just becomes boring. You're lacking enthusiasm about what you're doing. You're lacking enthusiasm about even showing up in the morning. You have trouble focusing at work. If you work with people as part of your job, you're noticing that you just don't enjoy those interactions anymore. You don't enjoy helping people. You might get frustrated over very minor things that come up, or even just having minor interactions with people, and a decreased tolerance for stress. So kind of just feeling disorganized, and your head might be, all over the place, and you might just not be in a groove. You might be having difficulty getting through the day. I feel like these are symptoms that people might experience on a bad day, or just a bad week, or they might come up occasionally. That's normal. I feel like these symptoms are very common when it comes to work, unfortunately, in society. But if you're noticing that this is a consistent pattern and that some of these things aren't going away, then that is definitely something to look at. If some of these are not addressed and it is consistent, that's when you can start to see symptoms of burnout. The difference is if these symptoms are temporary, just like stress, as long as it's not chronic, it usually doesn't last very long. You can make it through. However, if it's chronic stress and these symptoms continue every day, every week, and they're not going away or they're not being addressed, that's when the burnout can happen. And usually burnout is not stress, it's not anxiety. You're not feeling on edge, you're feeling much more depleted, you're feeling depressed, you're feeling extremely fatigued. Not just tired, but just completely drained, exhausted, both physically and emotionally and mentally. You tend to develop negative thinking patterns of yourself and your job and your expectations at work. You begin to question your abilities and your skills and why you're even there. You feel hopeless and helpless and just stuck, and like there's no sense of control over your job or your life or your influence in the workplace. Sleep issues might get worse. You might have had sleep issues in the beginning when the symptoms first started, but now your sleep issues are getting much worse. You may have nightmares. You may not be sleeping, dealing with insomnia, feeling very isolated, not supported, alone, lonely. A big one is getting sick more often, noticing that your immune system can't keep up, or just feeling physically off. And in some cases, you might notice that you're using substances more to cope in an unhealthy way. All of these symptoms is why it's so important to address burnout before it happens, but it is difficult because sometimes people don't realize when burnout is actually happening. I feel like there's these expectations, as I mentioned, in society to work harder. Hard work equals satisfaction and acknowledgement, and the more dedicated you are to your job, the more you're viewed in a positive lens. There's just all of these expectations to overwork yourself and to work outside of work hours and to overextend yourself so you feel like you can't say no. And I really do believe that's a huge reason why burnout is so difficult to detect, because it is so normalized. However, burnout is not normal, and it can lead to so many different issues down the line: physical issues, psychological issues, emotional issues, just so many issues that are not good for your overall health. So that brings us to step number 1, which is acknowledging that you're experiencing burnout in the first place. So this is really sitting down with yourself, reflecting, and saying, is this what's really going on here? Because again, it's not temporary stress, it's more chronic, it's more extreme, it's more severe. When you're really saying, okay, am I stressed or am I burnt out? Do I feel anxious or do I feel completely depleted? Am I going through just a typical workday struggle, or has this been a struggle for a while that's making me feel completely helpless and out of control? Ask yourself if you're just pushing aside important issues or problems that are coming up for you at work just to get through the day, just ignoring them. If you're experiencing discrimination or inequality, are you just pushing that aside despite how much it really affects you? So check in with yourself. Actually, if you're watching this video, I want you to check in with yourself right now and say, where am I? Where do I stand in terms of my work? In relation to my work, do I feel just stressed, or am I feeling truly burnt out? Or are you kind of on your way to feeling burnt out, and maybe you can do something now to prevent it? But this is such an important first step, just to recognize that that's what's actually going on. So step number 2 is assessing whether something can be changed. A lot of the time, something actually can be changed at your job, but people just don't know because they don't ask. So have that discussion with your boss. Sit down and say, this is really not working with me. Just be honest, be genuine, and say, hey, this is really not working for me. Can this be changed in some way? Sometimes your boss may have their own suggestions on what they can do to help you navigate your workload a bit better, or maybe changes that they can make in the workplace to better help you. This can include pay. This can include just support overall. This can include work expectations or tasks that you have to complete throughout the day or workload. It can include help or resources that are provided to you. It can even include switching your type of work, so whether you work at home versus whether you work in office. Changes in schedule can bring up ethical concerns. You could bring up time off or maybe taking a leave of absence. So there's all of these changes that can be made just by having a discussion with your boss. Even just having that conversation with your boss, you can get a sense of what can actually be changed versus what might not be able to be changed. And even just knowing that can give you a better sense of how to move forward. Along with having a discussion with your boss, talk to your coworkers. See what they're doing to manage their work schedules and their work life. Maybe they have some really helpful tips and suggestions that you can try for yourself and just see if it works for you too, because sometimes we have coworkers that have been in our jobs for 10, 15, 20 years, a long time. So they may have it figured out themselves. So maybe they have some really helpful tips that you can implement. Also, just spending time with them can address the community factor, the support factor, and feeling less isolated and feeling more included. Another thing to mention about talking to your boss is if you're feeling less control or not much freedom to do what you want to do, you can talk to your boss to see if there are other opportunities to actually add to your workload in a manageable way where you feel like you have more responsibility or you have more say or you're doing work that's more meaningful to you. So see what opportunities are available to maybe supplement your current workload with things that might be more meaningful to you. Now, 3 is a big one. 3, I feel like a lot of people struggle with this, but it is one of the most important things to do when it comes to burnout and just things in general, to be honest, is knowing your limits and setting boundaries. How many of you know what your boundaries are, or at what point you should be saying no, but you don't say no, and you kind of don't really want to do something, but you just deal with it anyway, and then you just feel depleted afterward? I know there's a lot of you that struggle with setting boundaries, and it is okay to say no. It is okay to not take on every work task that is given to you, especially if it's outside of your scheduled hours, or it's not in your job description, or if you're doing something to help someone else out when it's really their responsibility to be doing this. So take some time, review your work expectations, your job description, see what has aligned with it, see what hasn't. Really notice what extra work you're doing that is not necessary for you to be doing. Also see your workload for the day, see if you can maybe space that out throughout the week, if you're just taking on too much throughout the day when that's not necessary. And don't be afraid to not respond to emails outside of your work scheduled hours unless that's specifically written in your job description. So that is a huge one. And that's a huge one in relation to what I mentioned before, which is the number one reason people feel work burnout is workload and feeling like they cannot figure out their work and life balance. It might take practice because it is difficult to say no and to set those boundaries and to stick with your limits, but once you start to do it, it does become easier, and it is easier to do in the future. So just try it one time and just work your way up and see how you feel. I should do a whole video on boundaries and setting limits and saying no, which I might do. So a closely related topic to setting boundaries, which is number 4, is to take breaks, and not just take breaks throughout the day, but to take breaks in terms of taking advantage of your PTO, taking advantage of time off. Make sure that you're taking advantage of the breaks that you have throughout the day. And by taking advantage, I don't mean just going on break. I mean using your break to unwind. Don't use your break to work on another work task that you weren't working on before. Even using your break to talk to people. Unless that helps you, unless that really does help you unwind and recharge, if you need some alone time, take a walk, go in your car and sit there, maybe take a very short nap. Whatever you need to recharge, focus on that during your breaks. In terms of your PTO, I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who are not taking advantage of the PTO that they're given. You're given this for a reason, and you don't have to worry about not being paid. So take advantage of the PTO that's given to you, and you don't necessarily have to go on vacation, but just having some relaxing days where you don't have to worry about work expectations or worry about responding to emails or phone calls, and just taking some time to yourself without the financial burden. So important. So that does relate to work-life balance and making sure work stays at work and your personal life stays outside of work. So figure out ways that you can set boundaries just for yourself to keep work there. And just making sure your personal life, and that includes everything, friends, family, self-care, which we're going to be talking about in a second, doesn't get pushed off to the side by your work life. So this is especially true for people who are seen as workaholics, or all they do is focus on work and they make their life about their work. But there's a difference between feeling passionate about your work and getting fulfillment out of your work, and it doesn't drain you, it kind of motivates you. That's a complete difference than someone who's a workaholic and all it does is drain them. They feel like they can't get out of this cycle, they feel burnt out, and it affects other areas of their life negatively. In some cases, a leave of absence can help. Switching to part-time from full-time can help. Those are great ways to just reset, recharge, take a step back, take a break away from the stressor, which is work, and to just get back on track. If you do switch to part-time, you can even supplement that with another part-time job that you feel more fulfilled with, so they balance each other out. Number 6. Number 6 is self-care. This is so ignored. People do not do enough self-care. Self-care is so crucial, just in general. Forget about work. I mean, I know we're talking about work burnout, but just in general, self-care is just so important, so crucial. So what does self-care even mean? So self-care is doing what you need to do to recharge, to feel fulfilled again, to reset, like we've been saying. Not necessarily always what you want to do, but what you feel you need to do. So ask yourself, are you doing things outside of work that truly recharge you, or are you just doing things that are kind of mindless, or they don't really help with the overall situation, like scrolling through your phone or spending time with people who drain you even further, binge watching TV or binge eating foods that are not healthy for you and might affect your sleep or might affect your physical health. So those are all things that you might want to do, but they're not considered self-care because that is not helping you. And the reason why this is so important is because if you did incorporate self-care practices into the time that you're not working, this could significantly help you be able to better handle your actual job. If we're burnt out at work, and we're doing activities at home that are not really helping us recharge, we would never have energy to work the next day. It would just be this endless cycle. But if you feel burnt out at work, yet you're kind of recharging slowly at home with self-care practices, eventually you can have enough energy to get through the day at work and even to figure out your next steps. So make sure you are unwinding and resetting. Self-care looks different for everybody, so take some time to reflect on what you actually need or what area of your life you need to work on with self-care. Do you need physical self-care? Do you need mental self-care? Do you need spiritual self-care even? Do you need emotional self-care? Some examples of this would be focusing on prioritizing your sleep schedule, changing your diet, meal prepping so you don't have to mentally worry about cooking something every night, journaling, meditating, practicing mindfulness is a huge one. Maybe spending time outside in nature, spending time at religious services if you're religious or spiritual, or spending time in some sort of community or group. It could even mean cleaning your space at home and at work. Also, take advantage of even just short amounts of time to practice self-care. So if you have a commute to and from work, use that time to listen to an engaging podcast, listen to music that fills you up and motivates you, or music that is a space to feel certain emotions that you want to express. Use it to talk to a loved one or to friends. Use that time. You can use it for really anything. This is especially important for individuals who work in jobs that involve working with other people. So if you work in healthcare or customer service or therapy or teaching, if you work with other individuals and you need to show up for them and you need to kind of give part of yourself to them and meet them where they're at, then or care for others, this involves a lot of energy, a lot of time, a lot of effort, and is especially draining. So that's why self-care is so important for professionals in these fields, and also why burnout is so common in these fields. So knowing your limits and setting boundaries, taking time for breaks and taking advantage of time off, and self-care, those are three huge components when it comes to addressing burnout and also preventing burnout in the future. Okay, so number 6 is an interesting one because one of the 6 areas of burnout is values. And this, like I mentioned, has to do with feeling meaningful with the job you're doing, with the work you're doing, whether you're contributing to society, how you're contributing to society. So, and also purpose. Do you feel like passionate about your job? Do you feel like you're getting something out of your job? So along with all of the other reflections that I'm suggesting you do, definitely reflect on what this job means to you, why you accepted it in the first place, why you do this every day. One of the symptoms I mentioned was boredom. Are you bored because you're experiencing burnout? Solely because you're experiencing burnout, or is it because you're just not enjoying the type of work you do anymore? What is most important to you in a job? What do you look for in a job? What matters to you most in a job? Is it pay? Is it what you're doing? Is it the hours that you work? Is it a sense of community or a boss that you like? Is it where the job is located? Is it having a lot of control, or is it preferring not to have a lot of control and having someone else be in charge? Get a real sense of what you are looking for in a job and whether your current job aligns with that. As mentioned earlier, also seeing if there's anything that can be done while having a discussion with your boss to create more meaning and purpose in terms of your job expectations in the day. Also, shifting your mindset from negative to positive is huge, because when you are experiencing burnout, you do tend to have a much more negative view on your job, your workplace, what you're even doing, your abilities, yourself, low self-esteem, low self-worth. So all of these are very negative thinking patterns that are difficult to get out of. But if you try to shift from negative to positive by reminding yourself why you started this job in the first place, and by reminding yourself of what good you're doing for society, or what good you're doing with your patients or your students or to your customers, or contributing to your field through research, whatever it is, this can definitely help you feel much more fulfilled, like you're doing something with your life and your skills and your abilities, which in turn makes you feel better about yourself. So try to identify your negative thinking patterns, even write them down if you have to, and find ways to switch over to a more positive frame of thinking. And finally, the 7th step, which is kind of a last resort based on your own individual situation, is to quit. There are many cases where people quit their job, find a new one, and they're so much happier. Or they start their own business or do something where they are much more in control and they just have a much better quality of life. Just be sure that if you do this, find a job that gives you what your previous job did not give you. If you've done all of the reflecting and all of the previous steps, you'll have a much better sense of what you're looking for in a job and your career, and learning about yourself to really help you inform your next career move or your next job decision, and to prevent future burnout from happening. A lot of people see this as failure, failing at the job that they were at, and really come down hard on themselves. But this is not failure. This is growth, and growing into who you are, growing into knowing what you even need in a career, and finding out where your abilities really should be focused. Finding a job that gives you fulfillment rather than sucks it out of you. And finding a job that fits into that work-life balance, where work is not your whole life, because you are so much more than just your job. There's just so many other important things, I'm sure, that are in your life that you really want to give focus to as well. So see if you can shift from viewing yourself as a failure to this is creating more opportunity for success in your life in many different ways. Wow, that was a lot. If you made it this far, thank you so much for listening, and I hope these steps really helped you. And if you're experiencing work burnout currently, or you think you might be, taking some of these tips and using them today to see what your next steps might be in terms of addressing this issue. So thanks again for joining me today, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye!